My dad demanded to give my new apartment to my sister, who deserved it unlike me. So I refused, and when he started threatening to disinherit me, I handed him the documents proving that his favorite daughter. Growing up, I often felt overlooked. My dad insisted I hand over my new apartment to my half-sister. Apparently, she deserved it more than me. When he threatened to disinherit me, I refused and even handed him the documents proving that his favorite daughter always comes first. You know that rush when everything finally falls into place? That's exactly how I felt, standing in my brand new apartment after 6 grueling years of hard work. I'm Julie, 29 years old, and this is my story. I still remember the day I was promoted 2 years ago. My boss called me into his office, and I braced for a reprimand. Instead, he handed me a contract with a massive raise. From then on, I lived like a monk. No fancy clothes, no expensive dinners. Every single cent went straight into my savings. But it wasn't just my discipline that made this possible. A year ago, my grandmother, my mom's mother, passed away and left me $150,000 in her will. That inheritance, combined with everything I'd saved, finally allowed me to stop dreaming and start house hunting. When I found this perfect 2-bedroom apartment, I knew it was the one. Not too big, not too small, just right. The best part? No mortgage. The realtor actually did a double take when I said I'd pay in full. The look on her face when I signed the papers was priceless. I couldn't help myself. As soon as I got the keys, I snapped nearly 1 million photos and posted them on social media. My friends went wild with likes and comments. Congratulations, Julie. Living the dream. When's the housewarming party? That joy was short-lived. My phone rang and seeing Dad on the screen made my stomach drop. Julie, he said in a voice as dry as sandpaper, I need you to come over for lunch next Saturday. That call dragged up memories I've been trying to bury. I lost my mom to cancer when I was 9. A loss that tore our family apart. But Dad didn't stay single long. Within a year he married Sharon, and a year later my half-sister was born. Sharon never treated me kindly, even before she had her own kid. After her arrival, things got even worse. Suddenly, there were all these new rules that only applied to me. Julie, keep your voice down. No friends over. Turn that music down right now. Meanwhile, my half-sister got everything. Brand new clothes, the latest toys, always hers before I could even ask, and family trips planned around her schedule. It felt like I was invisible in my own home, drifting around while Dad and Sharon fussed over their precious daughter. I often wondered if they even remembered I existed. Thank goodness for Grandma Margaret. I doubt I could have survived those years without her. As home life deteriorated, I spent more and more time at her house, which was just a 15-minute bike ride away. Her door was always open, and her place became my sanctuary. I also found comfort with my cousins, Jack, Emma, and little Tommy, Aunt Sarah's kids, who treated me like real family. We'd spend hours playing board games, watching movies, or just hanging out in her backyard. Back at Dad's house, things only worsened. My other sister, Amy, had turned into a nightmare. She'd hide my belongings, spill drinks on my homework, and even start rumors about me at school. Yet somehow I was always the one blamed. Julie, why are you upsetting Amy? Sharon would demand. Julie, stop antagonizing her. Dad would echo, never giving me a chance to explain. Then came the day I got my college acceptance letter. Probably the happiest moment of my life. It wasn't just the partial scholarship, which was amazing. It meant I could finally break free. The college was 3 states away, and Grandma helped cover what the scholarship didn't. College felt like breathing fresh air after years underwater. I threw myself into my studies, called Grandma at least twice a week, and did my best to forget about Dad's family. Dad rarely called anyway. He was too busy with his real daughter, and when he did, our conversations were brief and superficial. After graduation, I returned to my home state with a job offer from Thompson & Mills that was too good to pass up. I assumed I'd stay with Dad and Sharon until I found my own place, but Sharon shut that down immediately. Oh, we gave your room to Amy, she said with fake sympathy when I called. She needs the extra space for her things, you understand, don't you? Dad never defended me. Not one word. Thankfully, Grandma welcomed me with open arms. I stayed with her while starting my new job, and after a few months, I saved enough to rent my own little apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Then a year ago, Grandma passed away suddenly, a stroke in her sleep. She left her house to my cousins, which made sense since they lived nearby and always helped out, and to me $150,000, the money she'd been saving her whole life. In her will, she wrote that the money was for the granddaughter who reminded her so much of her mother. That past year, Dad and his perfect family barely reached out. They didn't even invite me for Christmas, which wasn't surprising. I ended up spending it with Aunt Sarah and my cousins, and honestly, it was the best Christmas I'd had in years. That Saturday, I drove to Dad's house with a knot in my stomach. The closer I got to their neighborhood, the tighter it became. I checked my watch. 11:57 a.m. early, but I'd rather be early than give Sharon another reason to complain. I rang the doorbell, counting the seconds until someone answered. Dad opened the door, his face unreadable. Come in, he said curtly, stepping aside without a greeting. Inside, everyone was waiting in the living room. Sharon sat regally in her favorite armchair, and Amy lounged on the couch, eyes glued to her phone. Sharon barely acknowledged me with a dismissive nod, and Amy didn't even look up. "Sit down, Julie," Dad said, motioning to a lonely chair across from them. I felt like I was being set up for an interrogation. The silence was thick enough to cut with a knife. Dad cleared his throat a couple of times before finally speaking. "Amy has graduated high school," he announced as if it were breaking news. "She's enrolled in the local college." I nodded, not sure where this was going. Was I supposed to congratulate her? Send her a graduation gift? I hadn't even been invited to her ceremony. "That's nice," I managed, but it was clear they were waiting for more. "She needs somewhere to live," Dad continued, eyes fixed somewhere above my head, probably near the campus. After a long pause, Sharon bobbled in agreement like a dashboard ornament. Then Dad shifted in his seat. "Your apartment would be perfect. It's in an ideal location close to the college." I tried to process what I was hearing. "I'm not looking for a roommate," I said slowly. Dad shook his head, finally meeting my eyes. "You misunderstand, Julie. We're not asking you to let me live with you. We're asking you to give her your apartment." I laughed. A short, sharp sound that died as soon as I saw their serious expressions. "Give her my apartment?" I repeated, stunned. I must have misheard. As in, give up my home, the one I just bought, the one I worked years to afford? "Yes," Dad said firmly, as if explaining something obvious to a clueless child. "Amy needs it more than you do." I stared at them, feeling like I'd slipped into an alternate reality. My apartment, the one I saved every penny for, bought with my grandmother's inheritance. They expected me to just hand it over. Even Amy, who wouldn't even look at me, apparently deserved it more. "She deserves it more than you do," Sharon added, her tone dripping with the same condescension she'd used on me since I was 9. "After all, what have you done to deserve such a nice place? Living alone in a 2-bedroom apartment, while poor Amy has to settle for student housing?" I jumped to my feet so fast that my chair nearly toppled over. "Are you all insane?" My voice came out stronger than I expected. "I'm not giving up my apartment, not now, not ever. I bought that place with my own money." Dad's face darkened. "Your own money? Your grandmother gave you $150,000. That's hardly your money." In that moment, everything inside me snapped. Years of staying quiet, enduring abuse, and trying to be the bigger person vanished in an instant. "My grandmother?" I laughed bitterly. There was no humor in it. "You mean my mother's mother, the one who actually cared about me while you were busy playing happy family with your new wife and daughter? That grandmother had nothing to do with Amy." At that moment, Amy finally looked up from her phone, her face scrunching in that all-too-familiar way that always came before her crocodile tears. "You're such a terrible sister," she wailed on cue. "You've always been so mean to me. You've never loved me, Julie." Dad's voice hardened further. "I'm very disappointed in you. This is not how we raised you." I exploded. "You didn't raise me at all. You checked out the moment Mom died and Sharon moved in. Don't you dare lecture me about raising me." I grabbed my purse and bolted for the door, my whole body trembling. I could hear Amy's theatrical sobs, Sharon's comforting murmurs, and Dad calling my name, but I didn't stop. I had to get out as fast as possible. I thought that would be the end of it, but the next morning Dad called again. "Julie, listen to me." He began before I could even say hello. "You're the older sister, you need to help Amy. This is what family does." I almost laughed. "Family? Now you want to talk about family? Where was that spirit when Sharon kicked me out of my room? When Amy made my life a living hell? When you didn't even invite me to Christmas?" "That's different," he insisted. "You're being unreasonable. Amy needs you. You're crazy." I cut him off. "Absolutely crazy if you think I'm going to give my apartment to someone who spent her whole life trying to hurt me. Don't call me about this again." I hung up. But it wasn't over. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with messages from Sharon. "You've always been for Amy. You're just like your mother. Selfish and ungrateful after everything we've done for you." I stared at the messages as a strange sense of calm washed over me. Dad kept calling throughout the day, but I stopped answering. What was the point? The conversation would only go in endless circles. A week after that crushing confrontation, I decided to throw my housewarming party anyway. My new apartment was buzzing with the people who truly mattered: friends from work, old college buddies, and my cousins. The sound of genuine laughter and lively conversation felt like a cleansing balm, washing away the toxicity of the past few days. "Julie, Emma from the kitchen, we're almost out of ice," someone called out. I was on my way to the freezer when Cousin Jack, usually the life of the party, grabbed my arm with an unusually serious look. "Hey, I need to show you something," he said quietly, guiding me toward the hallway. "You might want to sit down for this." I perched on the edge of my new ottoman as Jack pulled out his phone. He hesitated for a moment before handing it over. "I was at Lorenzo's last night with some friends," he explained, "and look who I spotted in the back booth." The very first photo made my heart stop. There, in a dimly lit booth, was Sharon, my stepmother, sitting with a man I'd never seen before. They weren't just sharing a quick peck. They were locked in a kiss that left no room for doubt. More photos followed. Sharon laughing with her hand on his chest, him feeding her a bite of dessert, their fingers intertwined like old lovers. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. I know I shouldn't have taken these, but please send them to me, Jack pleaded. After the last guest left and the apartment fell into a heavy silence, I sat alone in my dark living room, staring at the photos Jack had sent. I had to know. Who was this man? It didn't take long to find out. Sharon wasn't subtle at all. He was listed on her Facebook friends. His name, Robert Mitchell. I clicked on his profile and suddenly my world tilted. Robert had been at Riverside Insurance for 20 years, the very same company where Sharon had worked long before she married my father. As I scrolled through his old photos of company picnics, office parties and holiday celebrations, there she was, sometimes in the background and sometimes clearly sharing moments that went far beyond professional courtesy. One photo from 15 years ago showed a woman in a red dress, her face turned away as she sat on a park bench with Robert. The caption read, "Perfect Sunday afternoon." That woman was Sharon, just 3 years into her marriage with my dad. Then I opened another tab to check for more recent photos of Robert Mitchell. As his familiar features filled the screen, those captivating eyes, the slight curve of his smile, I felt a blow hit me. I pulled up a recent picture of Amy on my phone and held it next to his image. The resemblance was uncanny. Amy never looked like my father, but she was a dead ringer for Robert. For the next 2 days, I carried that heavy truth like a dark secret. Every time I looked at those photos, I felt sick. 20 years of deception while my father remained blissfully unaware. Then my phone rang again. Dad's number flashed on the screen. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Julie," he said in that stern, authoritative tone, the one he reserved for when he thought he was being a real father. "We need to have a serious conversation. Come home now." I almost wanted to spill everything right then. The 2-decade affair, Amy's true paternity, but some instinct told me to wait. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I replied. When I arrived, only Dad and Sharon were waiting in the living room. "Sit down, Julie," Dad ordered. I complied, playing the role of the perfect daughter one last time. Without any small talk, he began pacing in front of the fireplace. "Your behavior has been disappointing. This selfishness, this refusal to help your sister, stops now." I watched as Sharon nodded in agreement, and my stomach churned at the sheer audacity of her. "I've made a decision," Dad continued, his voice hard. "Either you sign over your apartment to Amy, or I'm writing you out of my will. No inheritance, no family money, nothing." Sharon's face lit up with triumph. They thought they had me cornered. I forced a look of shock and distress. "I need to think about this," I whispered, even as Sharon's smile grew wider. "Good girl," Dad said, his tone softening. "It takes time to think about what really matters. Could I use the bathroom?" I asked, my voice small and shaky. He waved me off, so I hurried upstairs. But instead of finding the bathroom, I slipped into Amy's old room. A space filled with pink imperfection, much like her entire life. On the vanity lay her hairbrush, brimming with long dark strands that matched Robert Mitchell's exactly. With trembling hands, I took out a small plastic bag and carefully collected several strands. Next, I crept into Dad's bedroom. His comb sat on his dresser, right beside his wedding photo, irony at its peak, and I gathered some of his hair into another bag. That very night, I researched DNA testing facilities, the kind that could do a paternity test solid enough for court. It wasn't cheap, nearly $2,000 for rush processing, but it would be worth every penny. The next morning, I walked into the facility with my 2 carefully labeled bags. After filling out forms and receiving assurances about the process, I waited a few weeks for the results. When the plain white envelope finally arrived, my hands trembled as I opened it. Even though I already suspected the outcome, the clinical word still hit me hard. The alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the tested child. The probability of paternity is 0%. That very evening, my phone rang again. Sharon's name flashed on the screen. "We're tired of waiting," she snapped, skipping any pleasantries. "Your father and I need your decision about the apartment in the next few days. Otherwise, kiss your inheritance goodbye." I kept my voice steady. "Actually, I've been thinking things over. I'll come over for dinner this Saturday, and we can discuss it then." Saturday evening arrived, and I drove to their house with the DNA results safely tucked in my purse. This time, the knot in my stomach wasn't from anxiety. It was anticipation. In the living room, they looked like cats cornering a mouse. Sharon practically glowed with triumph. Amy lounged on the couch, smirking as she checked her manicure, and Dad tried hard to look stern while barely hiding his satisfaction. Finally, Amy drawled, "Took you long enough to make the right decision." Dad stepped forward and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm glad you've changed your mind, Julie. This is what family is all about, helping each other." I shrugged off his hand. "I haven't changed my mind. I'm not giving up my apartment. Not now, not ever, you selfish brat." Dad's face turned red. "That's it. You're out of the will. Everything goes to Amy, my real daughter, the one who actually understands family loyalty." I couldn't help but laugh, the sound echoing through the room as they all stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Your real daughter?" I reached into my purse. "That's interesting, Dad, because I have something you need to see." I pulled out the envelope and held it out. He snatched it, glaring as he yanked the papers out and started reading. "Read it out loud," I urged softly. His voice, competent at first, began with DNA relationship testing report, and then, his face drained of color as he reached the critical line. The paper trembled in his hands. Sharon let out a sound as if she'd been punched. This is a lie," she screamed, her face contorting with panic. "You forged these documents. You're trying to turn you against me. Against us." "I have more proof," I said quietly, pulling out my phone. As Sharon continued to rail about forgery, my fingers shook as I brought up the photos Jack had taken. I held up the screen for all to see. There was Sharon, caught in an intimate embrace with Robert Mitchell. The timestamp showed it was from just last week. Sharon crumpled onto the couch, her mask of superiority finally shattering. "David, please, I can explain," he roared, making everyone jump. "Explain what? How long?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face. 20 years. He stuttered. "She's Ichike, my colleague at Riverside Insurance. Amy, she's Robert's daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my father's world collapse right before my eyes. 20 years of lies crashing down. Without another word, I picked up my purse and walked out, leaving them to face their reckoning. The following week blurred by. I went to work, came home, and tried to process everything. I soon heard through the grapevine that Sharon and Amy had moved out, that Dad had hired the city's top divorce lawyer, and that the scandal was spreading like wildfire through their social circle. A week later, Dad's number appeared on my phone again. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity and maybe a hint of hope drew me in. "Can we meet?" His voice sounded rough and tired. At Carson's cafe, I found him hunched over a cold cup of coffee at a corner table. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in a week, unshaven, shoulders slumped, and noticeably missing his wedding ring. "I want a divorce," he said flatly, without preamble. "Sharon and Amy are gone. I told them to leave my house, and I've even stopped Amy's college payments. Why should I pay for another man-child?" I sat silently, stirring my latte. "Waiting, Julie," his voice cracked. "I know I've been a terrible father to you," he admitted. "Yes," I said calmly. "You favored Amy over me all these years. You let Sharon treat you like an outsider in your own home. You didn't protect me. You didn't support me. You failed me in every way." He flinched at my words but didn't deny them. "And you never would have known if you hadn't discovered the truth about Amy. If she had been your biological daughter, you would have kept treating me like a second-class citizen. You would have given her your apartment without a second thought." He flinched again. "Please," he whispered, reaching across the table. I pulled my hands back. "Please give me a chance to make things right. Let me be the father you deserved all along." That was 3 months ago. We still meet sometimes for coffee or lunch, engaging in careful conversations about safe topics. He tries to make up for lost time by sharing stories about Mom he'd never told me, asking about my work, my friends, my life. But I'm not ready for full forgiveness. Maybe I never will be. 20 years of rejection and neglect have left scars that may never heal. As for Sharon and Amy, I hear bits and pieces through the gossip mill. They've moved in with Robert Mitchell and seem to be living the life they'd secretly planned all along. Frankly, I don't care. They're just part of a chapter in my life that's now closed.